So, I am here today to share with you how I got the edit for this hospital newborn session. This is one of my favorite hospital sessions to date just because it has a really special story behind it. And I was actually meeting this cute little baby moments after his parents met him for the first time. He was adopted, and I believe that they got there about 15 minutes before I did. So I was able to really capture the moment in such a pure way. So I will share with you how I get from this here, which is my raw image, to my raw edit in Lightroom, and then the final edit, which I finish off in Photoshop. So from here, I go ahead and fix the white balance. So I do this by eye for the most part. I set my white balance in camera. Sometimes it can be a little off, but I use the Kelvin temperatures to adjust. And this was a little cool to start. I'm going to go ahead and bump the exposure here. And as you can see, this kind of pulls some of the depth out. So I'm going to lower the shadows just a bit and add some contrast in. I'll show you in my history panel over here just the difference between shadows and contrast, how big of an impact that has, though subtle. I love to add just a little bit of clarity into my images. I've always added a touch of vibrance and taken out just a touch of saturation. And then I like to pull up the curves just a touch and make a tiny little S-curve. This adds some more contrast, but also boosting more of the midtones. In my split toning panel, I always have it set to this magic number, which just adds a little bit of peach to the skin tones. So in the highlights, I add a hue of 21 with a saturation level of 3. I've been doing this for years, and I just love the way it adds a subtle little punch. My luminance on indoor sessions, I like to bump that up. I put my luminance at 25 and the color luminance at 20. I was shooting here with an ISO of 1000, so not too high, but high enough that I like to be able to remove any grain that is there. And that's it for my raw edit. So I went ahead and did this by hand. You can see a little more punch to my newer one, but they're pretty spot on. So then from there, I bring it into Photoshop, and on a Mac, I just hit Command E and it will drag it over. The computer here. Okay, so I work with curves layers to just finish off my images. From here, I just want to check on these bottom little arrows that I don't have anything important clipped or blown in the highlights. But I also want to drag it over just a touch to where it's hitting the edge of this histogram. And then I'll bump up my highlights just a touch. Then I will press Q, which creates a quick mask in my brush, and hit B for brush. And the baby here is really the focus, and everything else kind of falls into shadow. So I really want the baby to shine. So I just go ahead and use my quick mask to brush everything other than the baby and his blanket. I hit Q again to exit quick mask. I did that kind of messy. I just want to make sure that I have a nice big brush with the soft edges. I use another curves panel. And then I'm just going to bring down my midtones a bit. And then from there, I use another quick mask brush, so Q, lower the size of my brush, and then I'm going to paint it on the baby's just his skin. A little bit neater than I was going before, but still just kind of a rough grab of the area. Cue to exit. So now you can see the difference that the histogram, there's a lot more space. If you can see my mouse over here, between this pointer and the very edge of the histogram. So what I'm going to do is I press Option and I drag it over. And as you can see that if you're dragging it too far, you're going to start blowing things or clipping things in the blacks. I just want to have it just to the very edge of that on each. And then I bump up my midtones, and that really makes the skin pop. One more curves layer. To add some contrast, I go here to where it says normal, select soft light, and then put the opacity at 25 here, 22. It's usually anywhere between 20 and 30% depending on the image. I would use 30% for something that had more backlight. And then you can see the before and after of just the finishing touches here in Photoshop by option clicking the background layer. So that's before and after, and it just gives it that nice little pop. I don't usually mess with skin at all in hospital sessions. However, if you want to, I think that the easiest thing to do would just use your healing tool, and it's a J shortcut, and you can just, clean up a little bit of the dry skin. But I would leave most of it, like all the little spots on the nose and the little spots of discoloration, I would leave it. It's a hospital session. It's pretty raw. I don't worry about those things. And then I hit Command Save. And that's that. We have a finished image. Back into Lightroom. And you have your finished image on the left and your raw edit here. And that's it. Once I have a full gallery done, I'll export everything at the same time. I personally prefer to use Photoshop to finish things off, but they do have a lot of magical qualities over in the Lightroom brush panel that you could do the same thing just by using brushes to add contrast and raise exposure on certain areas of the image. So I hope this was helpful.